Howdy fellas, in this video I'm doing something a little different. In this video I'll be building a custom chassis for our Axial bomber. It will be running 420mm shocks, and that's about the only difference between an OEM stock bomber and what I'll be building. I'm gonna kind of show you a process or a few different things that will help you through the process of building a chassis. A little bit of tips, techniques that I like to do. I'll probably end up breaking it into 3 parts so it's not an hour-long video. So sit back, relax, get your notebook out, maybe learn a few things. Maybe you'll find that the things I do are a little bit easier than what you do, or maybe mine are a little bit more difficult than how you do it. But I'm just going to show you a few techniques. I got a little ahead of myself and got some stuff done, but what I did is I started off by putting a tab on the front link of the skid and a tab on the rear link of the skid. I then did this main tube with the bend and the cut. I held that on there, made sure it was straight, and then I tacked that on both sides. And then I follow it up with the pillar bar, tack that on, give it the angle you would like, and then I follow it up by putting these bars on and lining it up to where the bar lays against the tab. So after tacking that bar on, you want to tack that tab to that bar, which then the chassis is now solid to the skid for building. The next step that I like to do once that's done is I like to get the side bars done. Typically I'll just grab the bar, put it up to the roof, and I'll kind of eye it up and kind of get a feel or a look on how long I want it before I start bending it down for the windshield, which I'm guessing for this build is going to be about there. Of course, put a mark. So I also have a little bit of a different way to bend my bars. Most people use a bender, which I have one now. I like to use my vise, but what I do is put it in the vise, you know, get it to where it's almost pinching, but I'll line the line that I made up with the top of the vise. I'll then wobble it straight, tighten it down, double check. Of course, you always want to double check because screwing up sucks, but then you'll give her a bend. You kind of, for me, I estimate my bend and I'll go back and I'll either bend it out more or decrease the bend. For this, I'm gonna guesstimate about there. Once you get the bend done, you'll want to come over here, see if you got it to how you like it, and if you like it, you figure out where you like it, and you put a mark to where you want to cut it. Once you figure out your mark, put it back in the vise, get your safety goggles. I like to use my 4-inch death wheel. So sometimes with some chassis, this bar ends up being really close on length, and it gets really confusing on what would the top be and what would the front technically be. This one's a little easier because the top is longer than the front. But if that's the case for you guys, I always try to put it T-O-P, top, on the top. That way I never get confused and accidentally put the bar the wrong way. So once you got it how you like it, that's when the fun comes. You gotta try to duplicate your bar. Okay, so I'm gonna show you some different things that help me through this process. So one of the ways I like to duplicate my bars is get the new rod and butt it up to the end of there. You then grab the bar you want to duplicate, and so you see how the line's on this side of the bend instead of this side of the bend? We're going to duplicate the top. So this portion is going to be matching this. And this line is about right there. So with those butted up, I'll then make that line transfer over to this one. Like so. So I'll grab the other one that we're trying to duplicate, and I'll kind of just butt it up next to it to just kind of see how much of a bend I'll somewhat need, and I'll eyeball it. So I'm going to guesstimate around there. I don't take it out, I put this back up. So what I do is I then butt up the bottom, make sure it's straight with the other one, and as you can see, I don't have it bent enough. So I'll give it a little bit more and repeat that process. Again, there's probably fancier ways to do this, but this is the way I'm doing it. So you just go back and forth a few times, fine tuning, and then once you think you have it right, that's when you take it out, and there's different things that I like to check. So once it's off the vise, I like to do something like this, and I'll make sure the bend and that side is completely flush, and then I'll worry about this side, which this side you can tell the bend's slightly off because one side's butted against and one side's not. So now that you see where your bend's slightly off, I'll then grab the one I need bent just in my hand, just to try to give her a slight little different bend. Put everything back to butt it up, lay this one on top. So both tubes are now butted against over there, butted over here, and we're looking pretty good. So now I got the duplicated bar finished. I then can mark this side for the cut. So that's when I bust this tool out. I'll then again butt it up and see where it measures out to, which in my case is just under 6 inches. So then I'll grab the one I need to duplicate, again butt it up, make sure it's all butted. If it's slightly off over here, it's going to throw it all off. So make sure it's all flat, butt it up. I'll grab my marker. Once you put this line to duplicate this cut, you got to remember, now, are you going to be cutting on this side or are you going to be cutting on this side? In my case, I'll be cutting on this side of the line. So basically when I cut, I'll be taking this line away. If I was to be cutting on this side of the line, I would be cutting up to the line to where on this side of the bar where you're cutting off, it still shows the line. So before you cut, make sure to pay attention to what side of the line you need to be cutting. So now that the bar's cut out and we have our tops labeled tops, we then can butt it back up and see where both angles or both ends are measured to. So this is 4 1/4 on this side, and this is slightly under 6. Okay, so I'll grab the other one, make sure top was on the same matching side, butt it up. This side is perfectly 4 1/4, This side I could tell you is a little bit shorter, so then I'll be taking this one and I'll grind it down a little bit. And then the way I like to attach these bars on is I'll grab 2 of these. I'll butt one up towards the end of the cab, one towards the front. And the reason I use 2 and spread out so far is because once you put this up, you can then butt the bar up to the frame as well as lean it against this. Same with the rear. Now if you were to use 1, it wouldn't be as precise. You could lean it against it, but who's to say that this side isn't too far in, too far out, or the back end is too far in or too far out. So I like to use 2 just to make sure it's more precise. With the top labeled at the top, I'll then eyeball it while I put it on. So as you can see, I need to actually put this further up because I didn't have enough to lean on. But then basically butt them up to there, eyeball the top to make sure it's flat, and I'll tack it on. Now I got my ground on, got those up, mask on of course, gas on, welder on. Whenever you're done welding, there's always going to be like a little melted ball at the end. I like to grab some snippers, snip that off. But as you can see, I have the bar leaned against those. The top is flush. And I'll lay a tack down on one side. Which actually I just goofed up a little bit, so got a little carried away. Usually I like to put something over the skid plate to help prevent any burning. So that's should have been your step 1 or step 2, step 3, wherever you want to put it. But before you weld, cover up your skid plate. So for the other side, you just duplicate what you just did or what you just saw, and then I'll show you a way that I like to check to make sure it's really on and precise. So once you get both sides on, I like to just grab a tube, which in this case is a thread rod, and I like to just start from the very back to where you welded it and lay it on there and just slide it down equally with keeping your eye on this bar, which I know that is flat from the measuring and all the stuff I did to get to that point. So I know that's a good solid spot to base everything off. What I like to do is I'll slide a tube down and just watch that bar and watch the gap on both sides. Just make sure it evenly goes down. Not only will you see it, you'll feel it if one side's going down too far. So up to this point, feels very nice. It looks very nice. So then I'll change my angle on how I'm looking once I start going down. The same process going down, starting at the bends and referencing from a spot on the skid plate to make sure that that is flush and perfect. So if you find yourself doing this and you have a side too far up and it wobbles, that's when you just don't be afraid to cut it off and retry, and then again do this, make sure it's all good, and that's basically a simple, precise way to do it. For this next step, a nice cheater way you can get everything middled out, just grab a string and tie it off to both the axles and middle it out. Then you can come up here, measure it out, make sure everything's metaled out. Because for the next step, I'll be doing the roof bar, but I'll be putting a bend in the middle, and that's where this line will come into play. It'll help me direct the bend into the middle and not have it slightly off to one side or another. As I put a flat bar across, and I use the rope as a reference, and I put a mark a little bit past halfway for the bend, because when you do the bend the way I do it, it's not going to bend right at the line, it's going to bend a little bit after the line. So now that the bend's in the bar, I'm going to kind of line up, and then I will mark both ends to where I should cut them until it fits perfectly, and then I'll tack it on. So once that's cut out, I like to bring it over here and butt it up for measurements. And as you can see, it's right there. I'll flip it around, butt it up, and again, same measurement, so you know that that is centered. So once it's all centered, you got the measurements done and it fits, I like to base mine off the 2 lines that I used for the bends. That way you don't get it too far in or too far out. So next what I'm going to do is the roof bars. I'm going to do one like this and one like this. But right here it's going to have a little bend up before it gets flat, so then it's flush with the top. The way I'm going to do this process is I'm just going to make a line to where I think it might be, and just guesstimate on what kind of bend you want. I'm going to go for a real laid back one, so it's going to be more of like a maybe 30 degree instead of like a 90 degree. Maybe a little more. But then I'll go and I'll check it on the chassis and I'll see how I like it. Now that you got your bend, you got your marker, you can bring that bar over now and kind of put it in position and eyeball it. And that's when you'll fine trim this side depending on how high or low you want it. I just like to squint one eye and just kind of make everything line up perfectly, which I just so happened to get lucky with how much I wanted to bend to where it's all just working out. So I then will make a mark in the corner where I want to weld this bar to the pillar and side pillar. Now that the roof bar is all cut out, measured, and it's fitting just fine, I need to replicate it. So I grab the bar that I want to use to replicate this bar, and I butt it up flat. And then use the side that has the mark to butt up against that. Again, going to transfer the line over. Take it to the vise. Again, same process. I'm gonna go ahead and do
the bottom window bar. I'm gonna say about right there is a good sized window. And I'm gonna mark one side where I want to cut. Again, remember what side of the line you want to cut.
So next I'm going to be dealing with the door bars. What I like to do is I'll use one of these again, and I'll kind of figure out a measurement to where how high I want the back of the door bar to connect to the back of the cage. I'll use this bottom window bar as a spot for the front to attach to, but I need one for the back, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a measure on where I want the back to be attached, which for this about 3 1/4 is what I'm gonna do. And then I'll use those lines as a reference to be able to duplicate both sides easier. So now that I got my 2 reference points, I'm gonna butt up the front, kind of droop her down to figure out what kind of angle I want. Which this bar is a little long, so it's kind of hard to do right now, but that looks like about a good angle. And I'll start swooping up about right here. So I'm going to make the line right here to where I'm going to bend it and bring it up to the back point. So now that I got this measured out, I'm going to grab another piece, get the same measurement, and do the same process of bending and duplicating the bar. These are done. I'm going to put this back into this position right there. That way I can put this in there and lean it against there. So for the next step, I'm now going to finish the door bars. I think I'm going to lay a bar right there to this point. I found this in the scrap bin and it's almost perfect. I'm going to trim it down and duplicate it to the other side and weld them on.